She poured dirty dishwater over a man in worn-out jeans, laughing as her family joined in to humiliate him. They called him worthless, a failure, a waste of space. What they didn't know was that this quiet man they were mocking owned the company that paid for everything they had. Their jobs, their house, their entire comfortable life. And with one phone call, he was about to take it all away. This is the true story of how one act of cruelty destroyed an entire family in less than 5 minutes. And the worst part? They did it to themselves. Stay with me, because what happens next will make you think twice before you ever judge someone by their appearance again. Welcome to Reality Untold Stories. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you're watching from. Part 1. The perfect life that wasn't. You know, sometimes we think we have everything figured out. We look at our lives, our nice homes, our steady jobs, and we feel safe. We feel like we've made all the right choices. That's exactly how the Richardson family felt that Sunday evening in their beautiful home in the suburbs of Seattle. Margaret Richardson stood in her kitchen, the smell of roasted chicken filling the air. She was proud of this kitchen, proud of this house. Everything here represented years of hard work and smart decisions. Her husband, Robert, had worked at Pacific Tech Solutions for 25 years. He was a senior manager now, respected, well-paid. Their daughter, Sarah, had followed in her father's footsteps and worked in the same company's marketing department. And their son, Daniel? He was climbing the ladder fast as a team leader in the sales division. This was a family that had built something real. Something solid. Or so they thought. Margaret hummed to herself as she set the table. Tonight was special. Sarah was bringing her new boyfriend, Tyler, to dinner. Tyler was everything Margaret had hoped for in a son-in-law. He drove a BMW, wore expensive suits, and worked as an investment banker. He was the complete opposite of that man Sarah had been married to. That quiet, unremarkable man named Alex. Just thinking about Alex made Margaret's jaw tighten. 3.5 years of marriage, and what had he given Sarah? Nothing. He'd worked some boring job that he never talked about. Wore the same old jacket and jeans everywhere. Never took Sarah anywhere fancy. Never bought her jewelry or expensive gifts. He was just there, taking up space in Sarah's life when she deserved so much more. 6 months ago, Sarah had finally woken up. She'd filed for divorce, moved back home for a while, and then met Tyler. Now, looking at her daughter's smile, Margaret felt vindicated. Sarah deserved a man who could provide, who had ambition, who wanted to make something of himself. Robert walked into the dining room, still wearing his work clothes, even though it was Sunday. Old habits. Smells good, dear, he said, checking his watch. What time are Sarah and her new boyfriend arriving? Any minute now, Margaret replied, adjusting the flowers in the centerpiece. And Robert, please try to be welcoming to Tyler. He's exactly the kind of man Sarah needs. Daniel wandered in from the living room, phone in hand. At 26, he was already making good money and planning his next promotion. Is Sarah really bringing Tyler? That guy's kind of full of himself, isn't he? He's confident, Margaret corrected. There's a difference. Unlike that waste of space she was married to before. The doorbell rang, and Margaret's face lit up. Sarah and Tyler arrived in a flurry of expensive cologne and designer handbags. Tyler's handshake was firm, his smile was bright, and he immediately started talking about his latest investment wins. This was what success looked like. This was what Margaret wanted for her daughter. They all settled around the table, and the conversation flowed easily. Tyler dominated most of it, telling stories about luxury vacations and business deals. Sarah looked happy, radiant even. Margaret felt a warmth in her chest. This was right. This was how it should have been all along. But then, just as Margaret was bringing out the dessert, the doorbell rang again. Sarah's face went pale. Mom, don't answer it. There was something in her daughter's voice that made Margaret pause. A fear she'd never heard before. But Robert was already at the door, already opening it. And there he stood. Alex. He looked the same as always. Worn jeans, that faded jacket, hair a bit too long. Everything about him screamed ordinary. Forgettable. Unimportant. What are you doing here? Robert's voice was cold. You're not welcome in this house anymore, Alex. Sarah made her choice. Alex nodded slowly, his expression calm. I know, Robert. I'm not here to cause trouble. I just need Sarah to sign some final papers. It's time-sensitive. Margaret came to the door, irritation flashing through her. Whatever papers you have can be mailed. This is family time and you're not family anymore. From inside, Tyler's voice rang out, loud and mocking. Hey babe, is that your loser ex? Tell him to get lost. We're trying to enjoy dinner here. Daniel laughed, joining his parents at the door. Seriously, man. My sister upgraded. She's with someone who actually matters now. And there it was. That word. Matters. Alex stood there, taking it all in, and Margaret saw something in his eyes. Not anger, not even hurt. Something else. Something that made her stomach twist for just a moment before her anger pushed it away. Sarah knows why I'm here, Alex said quietly, looking past them into the dining room. Don't you, Sarah? Margaret turned to see her daughter standing frozen, her hands gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were white. There were tears in Sarah's eyes. Alex, please, Sarah whispered. Please don't do this. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Just leave, and we can forget about everything. Margaret's confusion mixed with her anger. Why was Sarah acting like this? Why did she look terrified instead of angry? Tyler stood up, puffing out his chest as he walked toward Alex. Look, buddy, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but you need to leave. Sarah's moved on. She's with someone who can actually provide for her now. Someone who matters. There was that word again. Matters. Something shifted in Alex's face. Just the smallest change, like a door closing. And before anyone could stop him, he stepped inside. Not aggressive, just walking forward with quiet purpose. Margaret felt her anger spike. How dare he just walk into their home? Who did he think he was? She turned quickly, heading back to the kitchen. Her eyes landed on the large pot in the sink, still full of the gray, murky water from boiling potatoes. Bits of peel floated in it, making it look dirty and disgusting. And something inside Margaret snapped. This man had wasted 3 years of her daughter's life. He'd held Sarah back from her true potential. He'd been nothing but dead weight, an embarrassment. He needed to be shown exactly how little he mattered to this family. Margaret grabbed the pot with both hands and marched back to where Alex stood in their hallway. Her heart was pounding, not with fear, but with righteous fury. You want to know what we think of you? She said, her voice sharp and cold. Let me show you exactly where you stand. She raised the pot and poured the entire contents over Alex's head. The dirty water cascaded down his face, soaking his hair and jacket. Potato peels slid down his shoulders and onto the floor. The water pooled around his old sneakers, gray and murky and perfect for someone Margaret considered trash. Tyler burst out laughing immediately, pointing and nearly doubling over. Oh my God. That's perfect. That's exactly what this loser deserves. Daniel joined in, slapping the wall. Mom, that's brutal. But honestly, yeah, that's about right. Robert didn't laugh, but he didn't stop it either. He just stood there with his arms crossed, looking satisfied, like justice had been served. Margaret set the empty pot down with a clang, feeling victorious. There. Maybe now he'd understand that he meant nothing to them, that his presence was unwelcome, that Sarah had made the right choice leaving him behind. But Alex didn't react the way she expected. He didn't yell, didn't storm out, didn't even look particularly upset. He just stood there, dripping wet, and smiled. That same quiet smile that had always made Margaret feel like she was missing something important. Then, very calmly, Alex reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. Water dripped from his sleeve as he pressed a single button and brought the phone to his ear. Hello, Patricia, he said, his voice perfectly calm and pleasant, as if he wasn't standing in a pool of dirty water. Yes, it's time. Initiate the Richardson protocol we discussed. All of them. Effective immediately. Yes, I'm certain. Thank you. He ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. Margaret felt something cold crawl up her spine. What protocol? Who was Patricia? You know, Alex said conversationally, looking around at each of them. I gave you so many chances to be kind. So many opportunities to show who you really were. But you never did you? His eyes landed on Sarah, who had collapsed into her chair, her face buried in her hands, her whole body shaking. Tell them, Alex said softly. Tell them who I really am. Tell them the truth you've been hiding for 4 years, because you were ashamed of me. What truth? Margaret demanded, fear beginning to override her anger. Nothing about this made sense. Sarah, what is he talking about? Alex turned his attention to Robert. Your house. Bought with your salary from Pacific Tech Solutions, where you've worked for 25 years. Where Daniel is a team leader. Where Margaret works as an administrative coordinator. Where Sarah worked in marketing until 6 months ago when she quit right after our divorce. So what? Daniel said, his laughter fading. Yeah, we all work there. It's a good company. What does that have to do with anything? Alex's smile widened, and there was something sharp in it now. Something that had been hidden all these years. It has everything to do with everything, he said quietly. Because I am Pacific Tech Solutions. Or more specifically, I'm Alexander James Morrison, the founder and CEO of Pacific Tech Solutions. I started this company 12 years ago in my garage. 10 years ago, it became one of the largest tech firms on the West Coast. And 4 years ago, I met Sarah at a charity gala my company sponsored. The words hung in the air like a bomb that hadn't exploded yet. Margaret felt the room tilt. That was impossible. That couldn't be true. Alex was nobody. Alex was a failure. Alex wore old jeans and drove a beat-up truck and never talked about his work. Alex couldn't be the founder of Pacific Tech Solutions. The man whose name was on the building they all worked in. The billionaire whose success story was taught in business schools. The tech genius whose identity was famously private because he refused interviews and hated the spotlight. But looking at him now, standing there dripping with dirty water, Margaret saw what she'd missed for years. The intelligence in his eyes. The quiet confidence. The power that didn't need to announce itself. And most damning of all, Sarah's continued sobbing. You're lying, Tyler said, but his voice cracked. He looked at Sarah, seeing the truth written all over her devastated face. Tell him he's lying, Sarah. But Sarah couldn't speak. She could only cry. Then the phone started ringing. Robert's phone rang first. Then Daniel's. Then Margaret's. All 3 of them stood frozen, staring at their phones like they were holding live grenades. Robert answered with shaking hands. Margaret watched her husband's face drain of all color as he listened. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. His grip on the phone got tighter and tighter until his knuckles turned white. When he finally lowered the phone, he looked at Alex with an expression of pure horror. That was HR, Robert whispered. They said I'm terminated. Effective immediately. 25 years, and I'm just fired. They said the CEO personally ordered it. They said security will escort me out if I try to come back. Daniel's call ended a moment later. He stared at his phone like it had betrayed him. Me too. I'm fired. They said all 3 of us. How is this happening? Margaret's phone had gone to voicemail, but she knew. She knew without listening what the message would say. Her job, her security, her identity for the past 12 years. Gone. All of it gone in a single phone call. Because she had poured dirty water on the man who owned the company. The man who signed all their paychecks. The man who had been married to her daughter while they treated him like garbage for years. Alex pulled out a handkerchief, wiping water from his face with slow, deliberate movements. You have 24 hours to vacate this house, he said calmly. It's company property. Part of Robert's compensation package. Since Robert no longer works for the company, you no longer have access to company assets. You can't do this, Margaret heard herself say. The words sounded far away, like someone else was speaking. We have rights. You can't just throw us out of our home. Actually, I can, Alex replied. His voice was still maddeningly calm. You can consult with lawyers if you'd like. But Patricia has been very thorough in documenting everything. You'll find that everything is completely legal. He looked at Sarah again, and his expression softened slightly. "I loved you," he said simply. "I would have given you the world, Sarah. But you were ashamed of me from the very beginning. You never told your family who I really was because you wanted me to be someone different. Someone flashier. Someone who announced his success loudly enough for everyone to hear. You filed for divorce without even talking to me, without giving me a chance to explain why I live the way I do, why I value privacy, why I choose substance over show." Sarah finally looked up, her face blotchy and streaked with mascara. "I'm sorry," she choked out. "I'm so sorry, Alex. I was stupid and shallow. I threw away the best thing that ever happened to me. Please. I'll end things with Tyler right now. We can fix this. Please don't destroy my family." But Alex was already moving toward the door, stepping carefully over the pool of dirty water. "I'm not destroying your family, Sarah. I'm simply removing myself from their lives completely, which is what they've wanted all along. They made it very clear tonight what they think, so now they can build their lives without any connection to me whatsoever." He paused at the door, looking back at Margaret one last time. "You poured dirty water on me because you thought I was trash. Something worthless to be humiliated. But that dirty water was probably the most honest thing to happen between us in 4 years. At least now we all know exactly where we stand." The door closed behind him with a soft click. Margaret heard the sound of an engine starting outside. Expensive and powerful. The kind of car she'd never seen Alex drive. The kind of car a billionaire drives when he's not pretending to be ordinary. Tyler stood awkwardly in the dining room, staring at Sarah like she'd suddenly grown a second head. "You were married to Alexander Morrison? The Alexander Morrison? And you divorced him? Are you completely insane?" Sarah turned on him with sudden fury. "Get out," she snarled. "Get out of my house right now." "It's not your house," Tyler shot back. "Apparently it belongs to your ex-husband. And honestly, Sarah, I can't believe you. You divorced a billionaire because he wore jeans? That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard." He grabbed his jacket and stormed out, leaving the Richardson family alone in their soon-to-be former home. Robert sank into a chair, his head in his hands. Daniel paced back and forth, frantically searching for information about Alexander Morrison online. The articles were all there. Photos of a younger man who looked exactly like Alex, standing in boardrooms and at tech conferences. The famously private CEO who had revolutionized cloud computing. The billionaire who lived like an ordinary person and refused to play the game of wealth and status. "I don't understand," Daniel kept saying. "Why would he live like that? Why would he pretend to be poor? What was the point?" But Margaret understood. Finally, standing in her kitchen where the empty pot sat in the sink, she understood. Alex hadn't been pretending to be poor. He'd simply been living according to his own values. He'd refused to let wealth define him. He'd refused to perform success for people who should have valued him for other reasons. And Sarah had been ashamed of that. She'd wanted a husband who announced his status, who played the part of success in obvious ways. She'd been embarrassed that Alex drove an old truck and wore simple clothes and didn't take her to exclusive restaurants. Margaret had never told her family the truth because she'd been hoping Alex would change. Hoping he'd become more like Tyler, with his BMW and expensive watches and loud proclamations of success. And Margaret, in her righteous anger, had poured dirty water over a man worth billions. A man who employed her entire family. A man who had endured years of disrespect with patient grace. The doorbell rang again. This time, it was a man in an expensive suit holding a folder of documents. "Richardson family?" he asked professionally. "I'm from the law firm representing Mr. Morrison. These are the eviction notices for this property. You have until tomorrow at 6 p.m. to remove your belongings. There's also documentation regarding the termination of your employment." He handed the folder to Robert and left. Inside were page after page of legal documents, each one meticulously detailed, each one completely legal, each one another nail in the coffin of their former life. "There's a severance offer here," Robert said, his voice hollow. $60,000 total. Split between the three of us. For 25 years of service, I get $20,000 and 24 hours to leave my home. That's not fair, Daniel protested. We have to fight this. We have to sue. But Sarah shook her head, her expression empty and broken. He owns everything. His company, his money, his lawyers. Fighting him will cost more than we'd ever win. This is his mercy. We should take it and be grateful he's not completely destroying us. Grateful? Margaret laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. We should be grateful to the man I just humiliated. It was always his home, Mom, Sarah said quietly. Everything was always his. We just didn't know it because I was too ashamed to tell you. I married one of the richest men in the country, and I was embarrassed because he didn't act rich enough for me. Do you understand how crazy that is? How perfectly it shows what kind of person I really am? Margaret wanted to argue, wanted to defend their actions, but she couldn't. Sitting in that dining room, looking at the ruins of their comfortable life, she couldn't find any justification that made sense. They had been cruel to a kind man. They had mocked someone who had treated them with patience. They had laughed at the humiliation of someone who had never done anything to hurt them. And Margaret had poured dirty water on him like he was trash. We need to pack, Robert said finally. We need to figure out where we're going to go. But as her family began making frantic phone calls, Margaret remained seated, staring at the cold chicken dinner on the table. She thought about the moment everything changed. Not when Sarah filed for divorce. Not when they'd spent years insulting Alex. But tonight, in this kitchen, when Margaret decided to humiliate a man she thought was worthless. The dirty water had revealed the truth about all of them. You know what the hardest part is? It's not losing the house or the jobs or the financial security. Those are terrible, yes. But the hardest part is looking in the mirror and seeing yourself clearly for the first time. Margaret and her family moved into a small apartment across town. The severance money helped, but it wouldn't last forever. Robert, at 53, struggled to find work at his previous level. Companies wanted to know why he'd left Pacific Tech Solutions after 25 years. The truth was complicated. Daniel found another job, but at a much lower salary. The cockiness was gone now, replaced by a quiet humility that came from having your world turned upside down. And Sarah? Sarah moved into her own small studio apartment. She tried calling Alex dozens of times, but he never answered. His assistant, Patricia, had been polite but firm. Mr. Morrison had no wish to speak with her. 6 months passed. Then a year. Margaret got a job as a receptionist at a dental office. It paid a fraction of what she used to make, but it was honest work. And every day, she thought about that night. About the dirty water. About the look on Alex's face as he stood there, dripping wet, making that single phone call that ended everything. She thought about all the little signs she'd missed. The way Alex had always been so well informed about business and technology. The way he'd donated quietly to charities. The way he'd treated service workers with genuine respect. The way he'd never seemed bothered by their insults, as if their opinions simply didn't matter to someone who knew his own worth. He'd been testing them all along. Not cruelly, but simply being himself and seeing if they would value him for who he was rather than what he appeared to be. And they had failed. Every single one of them had failed. Sarah stopped dating entirely. She'd wake up sometimes in the middle of the night, remembering the way Alex used to bring her coffee in bed. The little notes he'd leave hidden around their apartment. The way he'd listen to her talk about her day, actually listen, not just wait for his turn to speak. She'd had everything. And she'd thrown it away because she was too shallow to see its value. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, Margaret saw him. She was walking out of the grocery store, struggling with her bags, when a car pulled up nearby. An expensive car, but not flashy. Sophisticated and understated, just like Alex. He stepped out, and their eyes met across the parking lot. Margaret's heart stopped. She wanted to run to him, to apologize, to beg for forgiveness. But her feet wouldn't move. Alex looked at her for a long moment. He wasn't smiling that knowing smile anymore. He just looked tired, and maybe a little sad. Then he nodded once, a small acknowledgement that said, "I see you. I remember. And I've moved on." He walked into the store, and Margaret stood there in the rain, grocery bags cutting into her palms, tears mixing with rainwater on her face. That's when she finally understood. Alex hadn't been trying to destroy them. He'd simply removed himself from their lives, exactly as they'd wanted. They'd treated him like he was nothing, and he'd shown them what life was actually like without him. Not as revenge, just as consequence. The dirty water she'd poured on him had washed away all the pretense. It had shown everyone exactly who they were when they thought they had power over someone. It had revealed their cruelty, their shallowness, their willingness to humiliate someone they thought was beneath them. And in doing so, it had shown them the ugly truth about themselves. Margaret went home to her small apartment that night. She made herself a simple dinner and sat at her tiny table, thinking about her old life. The big house, the comfortable job, the sense of security that had all been built on someone else's foundation. Someone they'd treated terribly. She thought about pride and how it makes us blind. How we judge people by their clothes and their cars and their public displays of success. How we miss the quiet ones, the private ones, the ones who don't need to announce their worth because they know it deep in their bones. Alex had known his worth. That's why their insults had never bothered him. That's why he'd smiled that knowing smile. He'd been waiting to see if they would ever look deeper, ever value substance over appearance. And when Margaret poured that dirty water over his head, he'd finally gotten his answer. Sometimes I think about this story when I see people being cruel to servers in restaurants, or mocking someone for their old car, or judging others for not wearing designer labels. I think about how we never really know who we're talking to. How the quiet person in old jeans might be someone extraordinary. How the person we dismiss might be the very person our entire life depends on. The Richardson family learned this lesson the hardest way possible. They lost everything because they judged a book by its cover. Because they valued flash over substance. Because they were cruel when they should have been kind. And somewhere out there, Alex is living his life. Still private. Still refusing to play the game of wealth and status. Still being exactly who he was when Sarah met him, when Margaret poured water on him, when he made that single phone call that changed everything. He didn't need to change. They did. But they learned too late. The dirty water has dried now, but the stain remains. Not on Alex. On them. A permanent reminder that sometimes the trash we think we're throwing away is actually the treasure we needed most. And sometimes, by the time we realize what we've lost, it's already gone forever. That's the real tragedy. Not losing the house or the jobs or the money, but losing something infinitely more valuable, the love and respect of a good man who would have given them everything if only they'd been willing to see past their own pride. If you take anything from this story, let it be this. Be kind. Be humble. Judge people by their character, not their appearance. Because you never know when the person you're dismissing might be the very person who holds your entire world in their hands. And you never know when one act of cruelty, one moment of pride, one glass of dirty water might be the thing that costs you everything you never knew you had. The end.